Good morning.
Good morning.
How's everybody doing?
Good
Well,
morning.
good.
Happy Friday. All right. Let's see. Yeah, we've got everybody kind of jumping on at this point. We have one unidentified user here. Wonder who that is. Okay. Who are you, user? Let's see. Let's unmute you. Maybe they can introduce themselves. Okay, come on. Unmute. Where are you?
User, okay.
Yep. It says everybody's unmuted, but there's about 4 of you that still show that you're muted. Okay, anyway, happy Friday. We're here to do a little talking about drawing today. And so I wanted to start off by showing some work from a couple of different artists, talking about drawing in general, and maybe share some ideas with you guys about what drawing is really all about. Did everybody get the email that I sent out
Yes.
yesterday?
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't get it.
You did not get it?
No, I did not get it.
Okay.
I sent a message in the chat at our last class letting you know I haven't received any emails from you.
Okay. Now, when you're sending me things, okay, you're sending them on your email, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, because that's the email address that I have for you in the mailing list.
Yes.
Do you ever check your spam folder?
Yep. I check it.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. While you're online,
Okay.
let's do this, okay? Because yeah, we need to kind of resolve this issue. Let me send you an email as we speak. Oh, okay. Oh, we have another close pencil or Rebecca. Okay. Contacts. Johnston. Jeanette. Here. I'm looking for you, Jeanette.
Okay.
Well, and it may take me a while. So I'll tell you what, maybe once we kind of get into the discussion, I'll try to shoot you an email.
All right. Sounds
somewhere during the class. But yeah, we need to be able to get back and forth to each other. Anyway, so I'm going to start, and I'm going to start with a couple of different artists, and we talked about them Wednesday, and they're both African-American artists, but I want to show whatever samples of their drawings, or in like Hale Woodruff's work, some of his print work, which is a very similar process. Okay, so I'm going to share that at this point, and we'll start with Hale Woodruff, and then we'll go from there. Okay, where are you, Hale? Right here. Okay, so now this is a piece. Okay, it's called Africa and the Bull. Right. Now, if you look at this piece, it's part drawing, part painting. It's kind of a mixed media piece, really. But when you look at it, does it remind you of any particular artist? that you know of?
Kind of reminds you of Picasso.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. Okay.
Yeah.
And if you're familiar with Picasso's work, he did a very large mural or piece of work called Guernica, right? And it was about the Spanish Civil War and fascism in general. And he had an image of a bull in that painting as well. And so, this was, Hal Woodruff's kind of response to Guernica. And, that's one of the things, if you begin to look at art history, a lot of artists, it's almost like a conversation between them. Somebody will do something, and then somebody will do something in response to that. Okay. And that's been happening, more and more, as time has gone on, because people can see work, come into the public view more rapidly than maybe you could 100 years ago. 100 years ago, it would take months, maybe even years, for someone to become aware of the fact that Pablo Picasso did this piece and then respond to it. Now you have the internet, but even before that, we had television, film, books, things like that would show work, and of course, exhibitions. Now here's a very similar piece, slightly titled differently. Now this is Europa and the Bull. Okay, so again, it's and this is more of a painting and a final piece. But again, nothing really radically changed. Okay, same basic composition. Why he changed the title of it, I'm not particularly sure. I know that Europa was she's a mythical character. So I'd have to go back and do a little research on that one. But here's a woodcut, or a print. Okay, and this is, what is this? This is Sunday Promenade, okay, is the title of it. And again, look at the, it being a print, he's, and a woodblock print, he's carved out or cut out the areas that remain white, inked the block, and then, pressed it on the paper. And you get this, overall very dark field with these white shapes coming through. And, just with the use of these cut lines and areas, you can bring out an image, right? So, this is definitely, what we would say, he was working with the negative spaces, and that's what's remaining, in printing. This is a drawing. And again, it's rather figurative in nature, and still yet, kind of moving into that abstract idea. And if you look at this drawing very carefully, there's a lot of, it's a very lineal sort of drawing. And you look at it, and it's a series of lines and marks. But along with that, let me blow this up. He's taken, and in areas, you see where it looks like he's cut back through, what he originally drew, probably with an eraser or maybe even with a razor blade or something like that, and scraped, to put in those lighter lines on top of the dark media that he initially laid down. And so, he's working back and forth, by building up areas of dark, and then either with an eraser and or with a like a razor blade or an X-Acto knife or something, scratching back through, to lift back, some of the media, and to change the value and the kind of the nature of the line and the area. And again, we talked about laying down your tone, And as you laying it down, trying to move, in a direction or around the form. And, here, he's moving in a very strong vertical way. Here he's moving diagonally. Here he's changed the angle again to move across that. I would read it as a leg. Same thing here, kind of diagonally. And so, see, he's not just working in one direction. He's thinking about the shapes and the forms as he's doing the drawing, so that it helps to convey that idea of, these planes and surfaces moving in different directions. Let's see. This one is titled Atlanta, right? And again, it's a woodblock print. And, look at, again, how he's used the negative and the positive, but if you look at the lines and the textures and things, they all work together to draw your eye across the canvas, basically from the left to the right, on the buildings. Everything's very directional, it keeps moving you back, in this space. So he's designed this very carefully. And, as you come in, with the figure, up the stairway to the buildings, you move backward and then you move up into the clouds and around. So again, compositionally, he's thinking about composition. He's thinking about how your eye moves through this piece. And it's, it's a very nice, very effective drawing or, print. Okay. So I wanted to show you him. Okay. And then I also wanted to show you this is a very, very different thing. Let's see, where did he go? I'm looking for Kanter's piece, and it may be in the general mix of things because he only has one drawing. All right, so I'll go ahead and share this artist with you as well. Now her name is Judy Drew, and she's a pastel artist. Okay. Now, you could categorize pastel as a medium, as a painting medium. And when I first started, long ago, one of the first medias that I was given other than charcoal was pastel. And, pastels are about as close as you can get to a drawing process while painting. Now, this is a whole series of like her figure work that she did. And what I want you to look at is I want you to look at the way that she laid, the marks down. And, pastel, that's what you end up seeing is you end up seeing a series of lines or marks. And even though they're in color and they change value and temperature, it's still, like I said, very much so like drawing. And in particular, when you're looking at these, look at where the edges are sharp and where everything seems fairly well defined. And then how she chooses to leave other areas, rather loose and sort of just suggested rather than like detailed. I know if I were doing this piece, and a lot of other people were doing this piece, they would have, this very strong inclination to, rather than focus on the torso of the body, which she's done here, really to focus on the head. And in this case, see, she's really let this head just be like a very abstract sort of suggestion. The same thing with the hand, the arm, everything falling into shadow. She's just left as, a very brief indication. And, what she really focused on was the volume and the form of the figure. Okay.
I like what you said about using all the different
Well,
colors for flesh tone. The skin has a lot of different colors.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Flesh tone is not one color. You know, it's made up of so many different colors, and light really affects that. You know, you can take the same person, put them in 4 or 5 different lighting situations, and the colors in their skin will radically change. Yeah. So here's another piece, and again, you know, what is she really focused on here? And you know, when you really start looking at this piece very carefully, what you clearly see is you see the arm, and you see the form in the arm and how the value turns, and you begin to get this sense of volume, particularly in this upper part of the arm. And then as it moves back into shadow, it gets a little flatter, and again, just more of a suggestion than really, you know, any detail. The same thing that she did here with this part of the arm, she also took the time to do along the upper leg and the dress, again, to indicate the volume of the figure that's laying underneath, you know, that drapery that's wrapped around it. So, and it gets this nice sense of, you know exactly where, you know, to look. Your eye just goes right to the torso, and particularly like right in this area. And then the rest of it is just sort of supporting that idea. And, you know, she's not really taking a lot of time to, you know, fuss or, you know, render, you know, any of, say, the face or the hands or anything else. Okay. Again, you know, another piece. You know, again, and see, flesh tones again, but totally different temperatures, totally different color range. This is more green, gray, a little bit of pink and things in there, but, you know, for the most part, very kind of cool skin tones. And again, where she's really focused is really kind of in this area right in here around the ear and the shoulder. And then the rest of it, it's there, but it just sort of softens and goes away. So you see, she's being very intentional about where she wants you to look. You know, everything is not equal. Okay.
Charles,
Yes.
it looks like, it appears like it could be done with a palette knife, part of it. It just,
Well, these are all pastels.
but it gives the appearance of a palette knife.
Well, yeah, it could be. Yeah, because you get a lot of like lines, you know, again, because you've got a tool, which is a color piece of chalk, you know, and you're making a mark. So, you know, that's why I'm saying it's more like drawing, even though it's considered a painting medium. You know, it's closer to the process of drawing.
Okay.
You're just drawing with color, literally, in this case. Now, you know, along with this, well, I'll tell you about that in a minute. I want to talk about this piece as well. Now, when you look at the figure, and we talked about how you lay down, you know, the directional sort of strokes to begin to build up, you know, the idea that this has form and volume, right? And she's done this, you know, very nicely, you know, in the leg and around the torso. And look, you know, if you really kind of squint your eye down, you know, the figure looks kind of flat, right? But she has just enough change in color and temperature and value, plus the way she laid down the directions of putting the color on there, to tell you that that torso is actually twisted, you know, so that that shoulder moves back, this one moves forward, you know, and the body actually seems like it's torqued and twisted. And, you know, that's not an easy thing to get, you know, when you start talking about, you know, trying to draw that. And it's very subtle, but if you follow along the line of the rib cage here, you just see how that moves inside just a little bit right in this area. It's kind of bluish and it kind of comes inside. And then she picks it up down here at the bottom, you know, of the stomach, see? And so these connect and they move around the figure. And, you know, I've talked about that several times, you know, in drawings, looking for not just the outline of something, but how do you bring that in and across the form, okay? And this is the final piece. And I'll blow this up a bit. Now this one, again, you know, if you look at it, it's like, you know, where are you really focused on? And for the most part, it's this line right here along the line and the hip area. Everything else on the shadow side, again, she sort of lets go of, and just, you know, she puts in a color, she puts in a value, but again, it's a suggestion that the rest of the figure is there. And, you know, really the only thing that she really focused on here was really this hip and then this panel with the pattern and things in the background. So this area right in here becomes sort of the focal point, and the rest of it again becomes sort of secondary in the actual piece. So again, you know, it's that idea of being very intentional about where you want, you know, the viewer to look. Yeah, a bunch of them. Wow. Okay. So with that idea, you know, in mind, let's move on. And I've got some other pieces to show, and I'm going to also start talking about some of the pieces that you guys sent in as well, because we've got some interesting drawings in this time. So, and we talked about this gentleman Wednesday as well.
I was just asking Curtis how
specifically in
that come about, because there isn't
some of the work that Elon
what you read was right.
And this
because that was for summer.
artist,
But how do you get to
Can you, because somebody needs some
Chuck
music.
okay?
right?
Now, Chuck Close is a what you would call a hyper realist. Okay. Now, this is actually a drawing. Okay, but it's not a drawing that's on just a small piece of paper. You know, if you look at the scale of his work,
Right.
that gives you an idea of how large these are. Okay, and this, you know, tends to be not one of his larger pieces. So when you're working, you know, at that scale, you know, you're working in these small areas, you know, because as you're drawing, you're very close to this thing, and you've got to keep backing up, you know, moving backward, you know, taking a look at it and seeing, you know, what the surfaces and values are doing, you know, as you're working on it. But again, you know, working at that scale, when it reduces down and you view it on a screen like this, or you're standing across a room from it, it looks, you know, photographic. And that's one of the advantages of working very large. When you look at a lot of the work that a lot of commercial illustrators have done over the many, many years, such as like Norman Rockwell.
Excuse me, Charles.
Yes.
We can hardly hear you because somebody has a lot of background noise. They need to mute themselves.
Oh, okay. Well, here, I'll do it for them.
Thank you.
I'll mute everybody.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. Is that better? Okay, good.
Much better.
All right. So let's go back to where we were. Whoop. There we go. Okay. So I kind of lost my train of thought. Okay. So we have, again, you know, working at that scale, you know, you have the ability to, you know, get something that looks, when it reduces down, to be something that looks really photographic. But in fact, when you start getting very close to these, then you begin to see the process, that they work through. And that, again, that was the same thing that commercial illustrators would do, from really around about 1900 forward. A lot of the illustrations that you see in books and magazines and things are really done very large, and then they're photographed and reduced. And so they tighten up and they look, again, almost, photographic.
What medium is this?
I think he did this in like colored chalks, like almost like pastels, but they were like a set of gray chalks, like white to black. And, they're done on, very large sheets of, paper.
What is the artist's name again?
Chuck Close. Okay. Yeah, we talked about him on Wednesday briefly. Okay. All right. So let's. Okay. Now here's an artist that I wanted to show you. Now we talked about him on Wednesday as well. Okay. And this was Henryoswald Kanter. And Tanner was, an excellent painter, but, he could draw quite well. And I think this is a good example of a lot of the things that we've talked about, in the process of drawing. Look at where you actually see a line, outlining the figure, and look at where you don't, see? Like where the shoulders are, in particular, this shoulder, there's very little outline. And it's like, as you begin to move down the arm and down the form, and particularly in areas that fall into darker range of value, you get more of an outline because you get, that area falling into shadow. And then as you move out of those darker values into midtones and lights, see, that line, gets thinner, lighter, or disappears sometimes, totally, right? And so by modulating your line as you move along, if you're doing a lineal drawing, just changing the weight, the thickness, how hard or how soft it is, you can begin to convey the idea of where the light and the shadow, actually attach to these forms. So if you're doing a figure drawing, or if you're drawing an egg or any other object out there, it's not going to have a solid, continuous, consistent line around it if it has any kind of form and if there's any light hitting it. If it's a totally flat shape, you may get an equal outline. But the minute it starts having any kind of volume or form to it whatsoever, then those lines have to change as they move along that form. They can't stay the same. And one of the things, in the actual drawing classes when we were doing them at Benson, that I kept trying to point out to people, if you have an arm, right, the line over here cannot be equal to the line out here. They have to change, right? Because if you make them the same, what you're saying is that the light is equal on both of those sides of that form. And that doesn't happen, okay? It'll almost never happen. So you're not going to have two equal outlines. You're always going to have areas, like falling into shadow where those lines are darker and bolder. And then you're going to have areas where those lines almost disappear, into the light. And you can kind of see that. Let's go back to Close's work as well. Now, you don't really see a lot of outline, in his work. It was there, but he's taken it and softened it, basically eliminated a lot of the actual outline, to the drawing. And it's really reliant on tone and texture to turn the form. but he still has hard and soft edges, you know, in these drawings. So we're down to 9 minutes and 54 seconds. All right. So, you know, let's take a look at a couple of drawings here. June sent in, June Wang.
Charles.
Yes.
Charles.
Yes.
Hi, it's me, Fran. Isn't that called a worm's eye view? It's like you're really looking up. It's a little bit more distorted, the face, as you're looking up. You're not looking straight at him.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm looking up at him.
Right.
I was told it was a worm's eye view.
Yeah, I've never heard of it quite referred to that way, but okay. You know, I guess so.
Okay.
All right. Anyway, I wanted to look at June's drawing here real quick. Okay, now, she did this drawing, and this is out of a figure drawing out of a drawing manual or book by a artist whose name was Robert Fawcett. Okay, and Fawcett was an illustrator from, I think, about probably the 30s all the way up through about the 70s or 80s. And he produced a couple of different drawing books, you know, on drawing the figure. And again, you know, she's followed his, you know, his method and his drawing style pretty carefully. And when you look at the figure, it's the same thing we were just talking about. You know, she's beginning to get some variation in her line. So there's a very different type of line here than on the back side of this arm, or on the back side of the figure, or under the leg, right? And because there's a difference in contrast between the line on the top of the leg and below, just a change in weight and value, you see, it's giving you this information that there's more light hitting the top of the leg. As it moves around a form, it's falling into shadow, okay? And so keeping that in mind as you're doing your drawings, you know, think about that. You know, think about where the line, you know, can change. Where do I need to make a thicker, heavier line to say that it's actually attached to a tone or a shadow? Whether you get around to actually laying that tone in or not is not nearly as important as making that change in the line, so that you know, if you were to go back in later and add to the drawing, where that would be. Okay? So you can use it, you know, as sort of a shorthand, particularly with like gesture drawings and quick drawings. Changing that weight, you know, paying particular attention to, you know, the types of lines that you put down in areas do matter, okay? Here she did an apple, and again, you know, she's using the pencil and she's moving around the form. And, you know, when you look at this apple and this spoon, they actually feel like they have a little bit of weight and a little bit of form to them. So I think she was, you know, pretty successful, you know, in doing these. Let's see. Here's a recent drawing that I got, and this is from Larry, okay, Lawrence Ligner. And, you know, he's focusing on basically the eyes and the form in the face. There's not a lot of outline here, you know, other than there's a few sharp edges around the features of the face, and the rest of the drawing is pretty much so just a suggestion, much like the pastels that we looked at. So, you know, in looking at this drawing, it's pretty effective in the sense that you go directly to the features, which is what he wants to show you. Okay. Thought that was a pretty good drawing. Now, he sent this one in as well. Now, this one didn't work so well. Okay. You know, he's got some indication of the outline of the face, and the proportion and shape of the face itself, you know, all feels pretty good. But then you get down to the features, like the eyes in particular, seem to be the problem here. And they don't quite feel like they move around the form, do they? Okay. And my suggestion to him was to go back in and lay in some light lines, some ellipses, you know, like an ellipse around the form of that head. And then really try to line those eyes up, because this one seems to be going down and this one seems to be going up, and they don't quite match up very well. Here's a study that he did, you know, of a still life, a couple of books and a piece of ceramics. And, you know, it's a nice study. And it's beginning to work pretty well for him, and he's beginning to get some shape and some form in there, right? We have a ballerina, you know, by Naomi, okay, and that was from the Degas piece. And, you know, there's a little bit of variation, you know, in the types of lines and things that she's using. You know, probably like down here in the leg, if she would have not, you know, put such a heavy line down there, but just had a very light indication of the leg, you know, then it wouldn't quite feel as distracting as it does. And your focus would have stayed more up here in the upper body. And so, you know, just again, you know, thinking about where you're putting those, where do you want the eye to go? You know, how important is that leg, and how much work do you have to really do to make it look and feel like a leg? And it could radically change, you know, the outcome of drawing. So, you know, drawing is one of those things, it's a thinking process. You've got, you know, you've got to stay kind of focused on what you're doing and think through it before you know, just put something down real quick. This is a drawing, and this is, I believe, Wanda's drawing. Is Wanda here? Let's see. Fran. Huh. Yeah, I don't know whether she's here or not. Okay. Anyhow. So, you know, again, you know, it's a very nice drawing. You know, she's got some strong patterns and shapes and things in there. Pretty nice range of value. She's got a good, strong indication of a cast shadow, you know, in the drawing. So there's a lot of really nice stuff that's working in there. All I would say is I would probably push some of the values. Some of the darks in here could maybe be darker. And from the edge of this to the core shadow on the pot, you know, maybe right in here where it's changing and moving around the form, the value could get a little darker right in here. And that would help her get that illusion that the form was actually turning. So let's see what else we got. Okay. So that's about all I've got, you know, that's new that people have sent in. We're going to be back again this afternoon at 2 o'clock. So if you have, you know, other drawings and things you want to send, go ahead and send them in, and I'll try to get them collected in the queue. And Johnette, I haven't forgotten about you. As soon as this goes away in less than a minute, I'm going to send you an email, okay? And if you will, if you get that email, then just send me back a reply and say, yes, I got it, okay?
Okay, I sure will.
Yeah, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to reply to one of your emails, all right? So the address has to be right.
Okay.
I would hope, okay?
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll try to get this straightened out, okay?
Thank you.
Anybody got anything they want to talk about while we have a whole less than a minute? Anybody out there? We got one.
I had a,
Anything
I
on
had a
the new
I had a-
project?
yeah, I had a quarantine anniversary yesterday.
You had a quarantine anniversary?
Wedding anniversary, yes.
Oh, a wedding anniversary. Okay,
Yeah.
I thought you were celebrating being quarantined.
Oh, well, no.
Okay.
Well, I bet we